As protests in Hong Kong ramp up, the mainland's response has been to amass troops just across the border.
Yeah, in Shenzhen, aerial pictures have emerged showing more than 100 military vehicles parked in a stadium, stoking fears of a Tiananmen Square-style reaction.
Shenzhen is only across the water from Hong Kong, but has experienced none of its chaos. Something may be coming, though. Satellite pictures appear to show Chinese armoured personnel carriers and other vehicles gathering in a stadium here on the mainland. It tallies with what Chinese propaganda has been showing its citizens and the world. A show of might with a soundtrack as bombastic as a film score. It is ominous, and it has prompted fears of a brutal Tiananmen Square-like crackdown in Hong Kong. Beijing has repeatedly said that Hong Kong is a problem for Hong Kong. Its government should sort it out. But recent attacks on symbols of Chinese power have riled authorities on the mainland. For now, videos like these are probably only a warning to protesters. Few regimes signal imminent military operations with social media posts. And it's also an important message to the domestic audience throughout China. Chaos over the water, but control on the mainland. For all its rhetoric, Beijing has been relatively patient with Hong Kong. We don't know, though, when that patience may run out. The mere thought is deeply worrying. Tom Cheshire, Sky News, Shenzhen.
It is quite a bombastic propaganda video, isn't it? And joining us now to discuss is Professor at RMIT University, Joe Siracusa. Joe, good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. I was interested in the comments of Peter Jennings last night on Peter Credlin's show, where he kind of set a time frame and indicated that within the next 2 weeks, China would make a crucial decision on whether to cross over and into Hong Kong or not. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, I think they've already made the decision, Pete. The Department of Defense in the United States today estimates there are 500 personnel carriers inside that stadium and right outside the stadium. These people here are the Chinese paramilitary People's Armed Forces, armed police. These are the personal police of President Xi. These are his Praetorian Guards, so they're going to be doing the Emperor's bidding very shortly. Look, right now, I mean, for the past couple of years, China has tried to win hearts and minds in Hong Kong. That's not working. And now the Hong Kong protesters or rioters are challenging the authority of the government. So everything's go. Now in the United States, at least 4 or 5 senators have talked about the penalties that will ensue when and if China moves. And it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And all kinds of things are going to be rolled back, including the preferential treatment Hong Kong has received since 1992. And, you know, the question in this neck of the woods is, does the Australian federal government have a policy that it's shared with anybody about it? I mean, do we identify these people as protesters or as troublemakers? I mean, will a number of them be allowed into the country? And let me tell you, when the Chinese come in, and if it gets any worse, the stability of Hong Kong will be destroyed. Multinationals will move out. Anybody who can will leave the country, and there'll be a housing crisis, and there'll be 10,000 people at Sydney Airport trying to emigrate to Australia. Do we have a policy on this? I mean, can we receive protesters from Hong Kong without irritating the government in Beijing? Are we worried about that kind of thing? So I think very heavy things are going to happen very shortly, and yet the Australian public knows absolutely nothing about what the federal government here plans.
This is almost history repeating itself, isn't it? Because it was back in 1989 when Bob Hawke granted amnesty to about 42,000 Chinese students. You know, it was a very, very famous decision. Is this something that is likely to happen again, in your view?
Well, maybe it should happen, but I doubt it will happen. And the government today in Canberra, whether it's Labor or Liberal or anybody else, they're worried about the million ethnic Chinese here in Australia who would regard these protesters as hostile to Beijing, as traitors. So you got the domestic problem here. Hawke did a very brave thing in those days. Would they allow 42,000 more to come in? Well, I should hope they would have a big heart, a humanitarian goal here. But as I say, the response from the from Canberra is almost, it's silence. I mean, the silence is deafening. We ought to have a policy. As I say, the Americans are very clear that there's going to be a very severe price to pay. So have the British. And, of course, the story is now from people like Senator Rubio that the Chinese can't be trusted to honor their international agreements. And, you know, typical communists, they just do what they want to do and only adhere to the things that advance their causes. So I think China's in for a rough slide in the United States unless this thing gets resolved with some kind of parameters. But as I say, in this country, we're sort of in the dark about what happens next, and that's never a very good policy, Pete.
Yeah, I mean, what sort of refugees are you talking about there, Joe? Are you just sort of talking about kind of anyone in particular in Hong Kong, or are you talking about the 100,000 or so Australian expats who live in Hong Kong?
Well, I think they would be the first ones out of there, the expats, and then there'd be the wealthy Hong Kong who would probably go to Singapore, Australia, or places like that. And they'd have their own money. No one has to worry about them. I think we'd be talking immediately about 100,000 people would be coming on an emergency basis. Is the government prepared to allow that to happen? I doubt it. In fact, we're so far away from Bob Hawke's time in terms of the generosity of or the spirit in the land that I don't think that's going to happen. But the other thing, too, is what do we call these people? Protesters? Rioters? Can we do anything here? Can we say anything without provoking a response from Beijing? I mean, Beijing is watching Australia very closely, and it's got a lot of leverage in this neck of the woods. So we have to play a very close game.
Is it your view, Joe, that there are Chinese, I don't know, want to say moles or irritants or actors who are inside Hong Kong at the moment who are causing trouble in the hope that that would lead to a situation where China decides to move in?
Oh, yeah, this is classic fifth column movement, a plant agent provocateurs. We even have a name for these kinds of people. I saw this in the 1960s in the United States when the FBI and the other authorities inserted people into student movements and that kind of thing, rioting and the Black Power movement and all the rest of it. And yeah, this is standard practice to put people in there. And of course, what the Chinese in Beijing want to do is they want to create as much havoc as possible so they can justify the pretext of coming in. And the pretext is quite clear. They're saying this is not about the future of Hong Kong. This is about putting down terrorists who are there, who are threatening a stable government, an empowered government. And so, you know, anytime you say there's a terrorist in the room, you get a free shot, don't you? I mean, you can just do about anything. Yeah. So that's what they're going to be saying. There are terrorists, and that they see the hand of the United States and others, and China will do what it has to do. But the one thing it will not do, it was not allow the events in Hong Kong to affect the people on the mainland, because, you know, this thing called liberty is it's very infectious and it spreads very quickly.
Well, just finally, Joe, I mean, how much is the Australian government in danger of being caught in the back foot here? Because it's kind of been reluctant to get involved in this stoush that's taking place. You've got the trade war that's happening at the moment. You've got China sort of extending its reach around the Pacific. I mean, if we've got 100,000 or so refugees who start turning up in Australian airports, I mean, what sort of a situation is that?
Well, you see, I don't think the Australian government has thought this through. I mean, you know, I don't care who's in the lodge or whatever it is. We haven't had a national discussion about what happens next. Maybe for fear of irritating the Chinese. I mean, the Chinese have enormous leverage. If they pull their students and their direct foreign investment, Australia's in a world of pain, and they know that. So there's a good reason for walking very carefully about this kind of thing. But we don't even have any indication if there's a plan. Now, if everything falls apart in Hong Kong, Australia should have a plan, and they should share it with the Australian public, because the Australian public deserves to know. I mean, it's very simple. I'd even settle for plan B if they don't have a plan A, but I don't think they have any plan at all, and that is a recipe for disaster.